Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I'm going to share a painting that was so much fun to make, and I hope it inspires you to try something similar with the materials you have on hand. This video is sponsored by Phoenix Art Materials. I'll be using their synthetic squirrel quill brushes, as well as their watercolor canvas panels. And if you haven't tried their watercolor canvas before and you're a watercolor mixed media artist, I highly recommend giving them a try. They're pretty affordable, and they are gessoed with a special primer that is compatible with watercolor paints. And it's also compatible with your other water-based media, so you can use it in a mixed media fashion like we're going to today. And this watercolor panel set has several sizes. I'll be using the 11 by 14, but it's really just a great kit, and it doesn't take up a lot of storage space, which is really nice. And of course, the star of the show is the Phoenix watercolors. Now, I used these back in February on one of their stretched watercolor canvases, and they were so wonderful, and they sold out about 2 hours after my video went up. So the 24 set is back in stock. The 24 color set actually has 16 single pigment colors in it. The colors remind me so much of Winsor & Newton's professional range of watercolors that if you like that traditional transparent watercolor, I think you're really going to enjoy these paints. They're subtle, they're traditional, and they're just a joy to work with. This set is beautifully packaged in a sturdy chipboard box, and it's got a nice thumb ring on the back of the tin so you can carry it if you like to hold it when you're painting in plein air, or you can just set it on your desk like I typically do. Usually if I'm painting outside, I don't bring such a large palette, but some people like to. It comes with a pre-printed swatch card that you can fill in using the colors in the set, and I like to do two things. I like to both fill in a swatch card for my kit, but I also like to save the wrappers that come on the half pans. You can see they are certified AP non-toxic. That color is anyway. They have been tested by the ACMI. And I will save the wrappers, glue them down to a large piece of watercolor paper, and then do a large swatch just for my records at home. So I like that you have both options there. And we are going to fill out our swatch card, and then we're going to start making a beautiful painting. I'm using one of the smaller quills from the set of faux squirrel quill brushes from Phoenix, and if these look familiar, it's probably because Phoenix is one of the leading suppliers of art materials for a variety of different companies, so they may make your favorite paints from another company too, as well as brushes. And I'm being kind of sloppy because I'm letting the paint go over the edges so I can see how transparent they are. Now, these brushes are very absorbent, so they're bringing a lot of water in, so you can see how pigmented and how bright these colors are because of the amount of water I'm adding. They're still vibrant. Now, if you don't like to do a messy swatch, but you still want to test transparency, you can take a permanent marker and you can draw a line in each of the boxes and paint over them. So you can do that if you prefer. And because, like I said, I'm getting a lot of water with these really super juicy absorbent brushes, I had to go back in and blot up some of the paint that migrated and re-swatch. But hey, that goes with the territory. I just want to have a record of these colors right there in the box. But like I said, save your wrappers so that you can have a studio swatch as well. These were so much fun to work with. I'm so glad they're back in stock, and I will have links to all these products in the video description so you can get them if you want them. It's really important to swatch your watercolors, especially if they're new, because they're going to look so different in the pans. They always look a lot darker in the pan than how they come out when you paint them. So take a few minutes to do that, especially when you get the swatch card included. I know making the swatch card can be kind of a pain in the butt, but when you have it all done, it's really handy, especially making sure you're choosing the right colors for your painting. Now, the painting we're doing today takes some time. It took me 2.5 hours to paint, so don't rush it. Have fun, and if you want to work quicker, choose a smaller canvas maybe, but just enjoy the process because that's what we have hobbies for, right? Well, let's get our supplies out and let's start creating. I love it when I have fresh flowers to draw, and I picked these in my mom's flower bed. She gave me total permission. She's like, why don't you take a bunch of these home? You can paint them, you can decorate with them, and she gave me a ton. I filled 2 vases full, and I loved that one there that had the little paper still around the bloom. I thought, yeah, definitely got to draw that one. I'm using a watercolor pencil to sketch on the watercolor canvas, and they're wonderful for that. I don't know if you can still get these watercolor pencils anymore. They're by Crafter's Companion, but any brand is fine, honestly. And I'm just picking up each one and looking at it as I sketch it. I did try to take a reference photo showing the flowers in about the same position, and I put it up in the corner of the scene here, and I will share that reference photo on my blog, thefrugalcrafter.wordpress.com, and I'll have a link to that. It might be a couple days after the video comes out, but I'll share that there if you want to find it. and go from that. But what I'm doing now is just wetting the background because I want to have a really kind of just flowy, bright, ephemeral looking, ethereal looking, I should say, background. And your paint's going to flow differently on the watercolor canvas than it does on paper because it's going to sit on top of the surface for the most part. You may get a little bit of staining of the canvas, but for the most part, it's sitting on top. So your colors are going to appear a lot more vibrant, and it's just a really neat effect. Now, a downside, or maybe not even downside, but thing you need to be aware of is that you can lift up those paints really easily in the background. So layering, you have to be careful layering, but we're going to do some techniques that works with that fact that they're liftable. And it's just, like anything, when you're using a different surface, you have to be aware of their qualities and their characteristics. But I really like how I can get these really beautiful, vibrant colors. I can let them flow. I can tip my canvas around. I don't have to worry about any buckling, which is really nice. And it really takes a lot of water. One thing you do have to be aware of is that it's going to take longer to dry, but that could be a really good bonus if you're painting outside, or if in like the hot summer weather, or if you live in a very arid climate and you always struggle with your paper drying too fast. The canvas might be nice for that. Although I will say that it's still gonna dry. Like, I've got some areas between those two flowers on the left that have started to dry up, and I did end up with a little blossom there, but it's not that big of a deal because it's really easy to wipe out any areas that you don't like. And I also find that the paint doesn't flow as much on the canvas as it does on paper. Like, if you did a wet into wet wash and your background was still wet, and then you tried to go in and paint an area next to it, like, it would just be a floody mess on watercolor paper. But I feel like the texture of the canvas helps everything stay put a little bit more. It's interesting. It's very liftable, but then again, your paints also don't bleed as much, but you can make them move. It's a very versatile product. And if you've tried watercolor canvas in the past and not enjoyed it, for instance, like the Frederick's watercolor canvas, I found to be very different than this, and I didn't think I would like this medium. But then using the Phoenix, it's like smoother. It's like a finer grain. It's almost like you've used watercolor ground on paper, really. So it's I like it. It's a nice surface. I recommend it, and it's affordable. So, and no warping. I don't know. I think it's worth giving a try anyway. So the paper has dried. You can see I have a really gnarly bloom there next to that flower, but we're gonna deal with it. It's gonna be fine. You're not even gonna really notice it. You do get a little bit of a shift from wet to dry like you would on paper, but it's not that. I don't think it's as much of a shift because the paint stays on top of the surface of the paper. But you're gonna always get that bit of a shift. The more water you add to your paint, the more you're gonna get a shift when it dries, but less with the canvas because it's not seeping in. So yeah, I'm layering up just like you would on watercolor paper. These brushes are extremely soft and absorbent. They are the Faux Squirrel brushes. They come in a set of 9, and you've probably seen them advertised from other companies because they make brushes and paints for a lot of other companies, and they're lovely. They're just lovely, and because they're so soft, they're not lifting up the paint underneath unless I really try to, which I'm not trying to here on the like little leaves and grasses here. But daffodil leaves are kind of like a thick blade of grass, kind of like irises have, and other bulb and rhizome type flowers have those kind of thick grass looking leaves. Very pretty. And so I wanted to put some in there because it also helps add movement. It helps fill in the bottom of the canvas and weight it. It just adds a little interest because when you have 3 similar flowers, you want to kind of pick out those things that make each flower a little bit different and add in things that will support and not detract from the flower. We're going to do a little collage in here too. This was so much fun. Like I mentioned, I spent like 2.5 hours on this, but actually it was a little bit less because my dog had barked to come in. She was in the backyard. And I thought I turned the camera off, but I must have hit a different button because it didn't turn the camera off. And I have like 20 minutes of just still footage of my table there. I did edit that out, obviously, but so yeah, about 2 hours, 15 minutes, somewhere around there. But it was fun because it was one of those projects where I would let a layer dry and go take a break and come back to it, and then really be able to look at it and think, okay, what does this need? The thing I really love about these flowers, I love that little bit of skin, like almost onion skin like sheath that's around the hip of the flower. Irises have them too, and it's one of the things I'm always interested and fascinated with irises as well. And if I was doing that on paper, I would use a piece of cut up credit card and I would scrape in the little crinkly details. But because I didn't have, this isn't on paper, I decided I would use my brown fine liners for this. I really like brown fine liners. If you're not like comfortable with your fine lining ability, it might just be that the black fine liners just appear too harsh. Try a brown fine liner. You can find them open stock in any craft store usually, or you can buy affordable sets online. They're really nice because they're just less severe, less harsh. They give kind of a vintage look, and you can find waterproof ones. Or if you know you're not going to paint over an area, these are waterproof ones that I'm using because I'm not sure what I'm going to do on top of them. But if you know you're at the end of your painting and you're not going to go watercolor over it, you could use water-based, like the fine line end of a watercolor marker. If you have those dual tip markers, that will work. But I just really like this kind of dark brown. I find it to be very appealing, and it looks great. It looks great with pretty much everything. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like a brown belt. Like you might, like in your wardrobe, you may have a pair of black heels and a pair of brown heels and a black belt and a brown belt. You know, it's because it goes with everything, right? It's like a good neutral. You can also find the pens that are more sanguine in tone. They're more of that like reddish brown. Those are nice. I don't find them as versatile as a nice dark brown pen. But, you know, we're all different. I just find black would look nice with this too, don't get me wrong. But I just feel like the brown is a little bit subtler and softer. And if you're not sure how much you want to outline, you know, sometimes I want to do a really precise inking and I want to do a lot of cross hatching and I want to do a lot with the pen and I want it to really stand out and I want a bunch of different points for that, and I'll do that in black. But sometimes you're not sure, am I going to put a lot of shading with the pen? Am I just going to do a little detail? Sometimes my fine lining is just strengthening an edge here and there, and sometimes black can seem a little harsh for that. In those cases I may use a colored fine tip marker for that, like a colored fine tip pen, like oh, you know how you get the dual tip markers? Sometimes I'll use those, and that will work out really well just for crisping up those edges, or I'll use a colored pencil or something. But on a textured surface like a watercolor canvas, I find the pens work really well, whereas a pencil might just grab the edges and not go into the valleys. I can use like this set here has like a flexible brush pen that's really nice for the bolder lines, and then I can use a like a 4 or a 5 or an 8 and just use it on its edge. Now I'm also using some acrylic brush markers. These are really nice for if you want to add opaque details, and I want to brighten up some of the yellow. And yellow is one of the colors that's kind of difficult to work with because it's the color yellow itself has a very shallow value range. It's all very light value and you don't have very much difference in there. That's kind of why when you see like granulating watercolors, you rarely see yellow granulating watercolors. There are some there, but they're just not punchy because there's not much value difference between the paper and the paint. Same thing when you're painting yellow flowers, you really need to push those values. So I'm going in with a really light yellow marker. It's lighter than the color that I have here. It's just going to push up those highlights. I'm going to use some white, and then I can go in with some orange even, or even some brown for my darker values, and that's going to help pull it off the background a little bit, because I need those flowers to be lighter in value than the background to stand out. And my background's in, right? I've already got that. I could go in a little bit darker with some other stuff, but for right now that background's in. I want to really just make those flowers feel a little bit more solid, and one way to do that is with an opaque medium. If you can go in with a marker, an acrylic marker, that's going to make it just have more body to it. Gouache is called body color and you could use gouache. Gouache would work great for this. Gouache is called body color because it's opaque and it has more body to it. So if you ever see like an old watercolor instruction book, you may hear them refer to body color, and they're basically meaning like you mix some gouache in with your paint to make like an opaque watercolor or a body color. So if you ever see that, that's what they mean. And I love old watercolor instruction books. It's so neat to see how the techniques and styles have changed throughout the years. Unfortunately, a lot of the older watercolor books don't have color photos in them, but I have to say the instruction from the older watercolor books are so much more rich than a lot of the modern watercolor books I've picked up recently. And there you can now look at how stark the white looks. That looks really bright. Now, what you can do if you're really quick, if you get too much bright on your piece, you can go into the wet brush and you can blend it out. But I kind of like that boldness, but it's just it's nice to know that you can deal with it if you want. I would not use those watercolor brushes, those soft faux squirrel quills with that, just because it would add too much water. You'd want like a synthetic. Now here's a trick. This is really fun. Take a stencil. This works great on watercolor canvas. Lay it down and use a wet rag or a baby wipe to wipe away the color. It gives you this ghosted impression that is so pretty, just this tone on tone, ghosted lighter impression. And it's just such a fun technique. If you want to do this and you're using watercolor paper, use a magic eraser through your stencil and you can do the same thing. But it's just a little easier to lift it up on the watercolor canvas. Now you can stencil with your watercolors. What I'm using here, it's these handmade or homemade blending brushes that I made. I took clear chess pieces, glass chess pieces, and I folded a white cosmetic wedge in half, and I glued them into the chess pieces, and I use them for dabbing on the watercolor. So what I do is I spray my watercolor palette. See, I'm spraying it, then I dab the foam sponges. You can just pick up a foam sponge, fold it in half. You don't need a fancy handle. And then I just dab it on the pans. I bounce it a couple times on the palette to make sure I don't have too much paint or water, and then I can stamp right onto my background. Now just keep in mind, if you go over that with anything, that's watercolor, it's going to just blur away. So if you don't want to blur away, you could use acrylics. But I'm like, hey, let's use what we already have on our desk. We'll know what matches because we've used those colors already, and it's great. These stencils right here I'm using right now are from an upcoming release I have with Craft World, and I'll tell more about that later on this month when they come out. But yeah, they're kind of fun because you can repeat them and you get 4 designs per stencil, and I have 2 stencils coming out, so 8 designs if that's something you're interested in. But I thought it'd be fun to grab that in there because it goes with everything else I have, and that's my kind of my plan or my theory when I am adding stencils to my collection. This is one from Crafter's Workshop. The other ones, I don't even know where they're from, Amazon, I think. I choose things that go with stuff I already have. I choose things that I like, so that way I know whatever I'm creating is going to be stuff I like. This is a stamp from way back in the day. It's by Tattered Angels, and it says Field Notes, and I love using this on a botanical kind of mixed media painting because I can, it just looks so nice. Now, after I did this, I thought, oh, I wish I used a black ink because it's too light, I think. But since I already used the black, I'm like, I'm just going to use it. Now, this is a stamp I made with my stamp maker, and it was just kind of like a hexagon design. I thought it's kind of naturey, kind of honeycomby, and I would add that in a few places. And I'm keeping with the brown ink because I've already used the brown ink, so well, I'll just have to make it stand out a little bit more with some accents, and that's fine. I love little collage books. Anytime I see these, I will snag them. They're so handy, and I'm just going to cut these out by hand. I found a few butterflies that I thought would look really nice, and I'm just going to trim them out with scissors and glue them down. Now you have to be careful when you're doing collage over watercolor on a watercolor canvas because you can't be going to town with the matte medium like I would if I was working over like tempera sticks or acrylic paint or something on watercolor paper, where even with watercolor paper, if I was using watercolors, I wouldn't use matte medium like I do often unless I'm sure that that stuff seeped in. So I'm just cutting this out with my fine tip scissors. These are by Cutter Bee, EK Success. I think they still make them. Nothing really fancy, just something that you can get detail with. And I am going to use a product called Yes Paste for this. And I'm going to be really careful not to put too much on. So what I'm going to do is grab an old catalog. Whenever I get these catalogs in the mail, I just keep one under my desk. I'll tear a sheet out. And I'm using Yes Paste because this is thick and it's not going to wrinkle. And this stuff is ungodly expensive now. I've had this jar for a while. You can see I'm almost out of it, so I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to pay up pretty soon to get a new jar. But I'm just scraping it on the back of the stencil and I'm pressing it in. And this way, I don't have to go over top or put glue down on my surface. Because usually when I decoupage, I do glue on the surface I'm gluing to, glue on the back of my object, and then glue over the top of it. And that would smear this. So for this, I'm using Yes Paste. And I will wax this entire thing when I'm done. But I'm not going to do that in video. I did it in my last video using these watercolor canvases. I'll link to that in the video description if you're curious. And I'm adding a little bit of brown fine liner to the butterflies because they don't seem to match or really work without doing that. I need something to tie it into the background. So anytime that you are collaging and doing a mixed media collage, but you want to make things blend a little bit more, try using a wet brush to blend out paint like I just did there. Try adding media that you've already added elsewhere to your collage elements, to your stamped elements, and that's going to help things blend. I'm adding a little bit of orange acrylic marker here that I added to the flower in some spots. I'm adding in some paint. I'm just blending stuff out. I'm just trying to make it match the colors I've already used a little bit. I mean, it's clearly decoupaged on, but I want it to flow a little bit more. Just like I'm using stencils, I'm using stamps. These things aren't things I drew. But I wanted to work with the daffodils I drew. So I'll go in with a pen, I'll go in with some paint, I'll go in with things to tie everything together and make that a harmony through repetition of media. So keep that in mind. And like I said, if you choose products you like, if you choose stencils you like, stamps you like, paints you like, colors you like, you can make everything tie together and work together. It's when you follow trends and you say, oh, I love this card that so-and-so made. I love this painting that so-and-so made. I'm going to buy the stamp stencils, things they used, the collage elements they used, because I really like that. But if it's not your style, it's going to look funny. You know, and it won't go with the other stuff you have. And you'll be wondering, why can't I make this work with my stuff? And it's probably just because you like their style, you like their techniques, but maybe you didn't like the imagery they chose. You might like them, but maybe their style is not your style. You've got to find a way to cherry pick the parts you like from a technique and take that knowledge that you gained from the tutorial and put your spin on it. Make it work with your workflow. Maybe you just like, I don't want to get into stamping. I don't want to do that. So instead of buying stamps, you buy a stencil. And I'm like, I can sponge through a stencil of honeycomb, or I can punch through a stencil of chicken wire or something like that. It's going to give me that feeling, but it's going to go with what I have. It's going to be using materials I have, and it's just going to work better overall. Now, when I design my products like these, this script stamp is from one of my stamp sets. I designed it so it's going to go with all my past products, all my future products. It's because it's my style. It's what I like. If you like my style of art, you probably like this, but maybe you're not like into the more vintage look. Maybe you're more into a graphic modern look and you're like, I don't know. I don't really like the grungy look. Well, that's fine. Take the technique here and apply it to the things you have in your stash that you like and emulate it, use the steps, but use the materials you like. Now here I'm going in and adding some more opaque product. I'm adding the acrylic markers over the stamped areas because it's opaque. I'm going to pull my flowers forward again because I got pushed back by the stamping, but I want to pull them forward and put that stamping in the background. So paint markers are a great way to do that. You could also use gouache, like I mentioned. If you had some white gouache, you can mix it with your watercolors here. And what I like about this 24 set is there's no white paint, because white watercolor generally isn't opaque. It's more for like a mixing, toning down, and without reducing the opacity too much. So adding a white gouache I find is a little bit more handy because you can mix it with your watercolors and have a more opaque color. It's not meant for mixing things. It's not meant for mixing and keeping a watercolor look, basically. When you have a white watercolor in a watercolor set, it's meant generally for mixing, so you still keep that translucent veil of color, but you can desaturate a color without making it so watery it's difficult to handle. That's why they put white in paint sets, and it's for that technique. A lot of people don't use that technique though, so I think it's good that they leave it out and then people can add it in if they want. But I just wanted to mention that because a lot of people are like, why do they put those useless whites in there? It's because it's for a specific technique. And if it's not a technique, it's not a very popular technique nowadays. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that in case you were wondering. And here I'm just after I put that blue on the field notes stamp, I was like, I don't really like that. It's just really sticking out. So I'm just kind of thinking, okay, how am I going to make that work? I feel like it's not meshing very well. So I keep going back to that to kind of figure out how to make it jive. And I used a little thin white paint pen, gel pen to add some details and sign my name. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to add some of that white paint pen up to that that field note sign, maybe that will help it work in. And then I do end up fiddling with it a little bit more. I used to be like, once I sign my name, I won't do anything else to it, but I've relaxed. I've relaxed in a lot of things these days, especially since that white gel pen wasn't quite as impactful as I wanted. So I went back in with a Copic Acrylic white paint pen and added some more bold details. Those pens are hit or miss. Those are Copic Acrylics. They're expensive acrylic paint pens, and yeah, I find that they're hit or miss. They're kind of expensive. And I'm going in and just kind of strengthening up the stems, because I was like, no, I want those to pop out a little bit more. I really want to cover up the stamping that's in front of the stems. And sometimes you just take a break, take a look at it, and you figure out, you know, exactly what else you want to do. And I decided I needed a little bit more fine lining to help bring out some detail, because I had covered up some with the acrylic paint marker. Just make sure your paper is completely dry. Those markers are dry before you fine line over them, or you'll ruin your fine liners. You don't want to do that. That's a drag. When you have a juicy fine liner, you know there's plenty of ink in there, but you've messed it up because you've gone on wet paper or over a wet marker. Just don't do it. Just let it dry. Trust me. And that's pretty much all this painting took to put together. You can fiddle around as much as you want till you have it the way you like it. And I'm really happy with how this came out. This is 11 by 14. I'll have links to everything I used in the video description so you can find it. And I want to thank Phoenix for sponsoring this video. Please check out their products if you want some really high quality, inexpensive art supplies. Thanks for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.